Welcome to Diverse Org, our conversations on Tuesdays about diversity here in Central Florida. My guest today is Gabriella Rodriguez. Welcome, Gabriella.
Hey, how are you, Terry?
Good. So you grew up, I think, in Central Florida, but maybe weren't born here?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Chicago, Illinois, lived over there till I was about 3, and then my adopted family actually brought me out here to Orlando, and we lived in various spaces in Orlando, and then kind of settled in Osceola counties, so Ponciana, when there was actually like cows and only like 2 stores. So those that know, but yeah, now Ponciana is diverse and it has various, I think even a hospital now from what I was told, but I'm now in Orlando and I love it and I'm here to stay.
Well, in cow country, as you were growing up, your family, your adopted family, what heritage did they celebrate or inform them?
Yeah, so they're Puerto Rican. So culturally, I was raised Puerto Rican, but I'm actually mixed. I'm Puerto Rican and Mexican. So it's now that I'm older that I'm now like researching and getting more in touch with that side of the family so I can know a little bit more of my Mexican culture and embrace that piece.
Well, Osceola has a lot of Hispanics, and Poinciana especially. So, but if you were there before, it was more cows. When you started school, were you? How was the population? Was it very diverse then still, or were you with a bunch of cowboys?
No, so Ponciana at the time was very rural, but Kissimmee was always thriving with a very diverse community, mainly obviously the Puerto Rican community. But I would say in school, it was quite diverse at Ponciana High School back in 2004.
And was that diversity well accepted, or was it very much separated?
I think it was still very siloed. I know for myself growing up, my family is very white presenting. So growing up, it wasn't until I was maybe in high school that I realized the differences and that there were silos of our African American community and our Latinx community and Puerto Rican and Cuban and all these different mixes. And sometimes we would intermingle, but a majority of the time we'd be like, So it wasn't, again, until I got out of high school that I was like, oh, okay, this is what this means. And this is why we sat at this table, or this is why we talked about these other people. And it was like, oh, okay, like I understand the differences, but it's now that I'm older that we're embracing, right? La Trinidad, we're not all the same, we're all different, but we also are the same, if that makes any sense. I was having a conversation with someone the other day because we had an event at Hope Community Center, which is in Apopka, which is primarily Mexican. And I was like, oh my goodness, we should make sofrito. And sofrito is a dish with tomatoes and onions and cilantro. And they were like, oh, that's kind of like our salsa. So again, we use a lot of the same ingredients, just in different ways.
How have you been exploring the Mexican part of your DNA?
So getting in touch with my biological family, that's been quite a journey. So kind of taking it step by step and just doing research. Now that I found out where my father's from, kind of like learning that background and seeing just the differences, but also the similarities when it comes to the Puerto Rican culture as well.
And is your biological father in Chicago?
No, he was actually deported back to Mexico. He was incarcerated for a while, and they ended up deporting him back. But now that he's back in Mexico, he's also not necessarily in the nonprofit realm, but he's an activist and teaches English and has his own storefront. So now learning, right? He brought what he learned here in the States and took it back and now is using it to support others and bring others up and uplift others in the community, which I think is so powerful.
Have you been to Mexico to see him?
I have not. I have not. That's something I wanted to do last year. So I have an older sister that also wanted to go. So we're hopefully planning for this year, and I'm super excited. We have itineraries already planned out, so we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Nice, nice. And your Puerto Rican heritage, how do you celebrate that?
So we
In
celebrated it through
person.
holidays, through foods, through gathering. I know out here in Orlando, we have a large Puerto Rican community in the Curry Ford and Cimarron area. But I know when I go back to Kissimmee, I always have my 3 or 4 places that I go to besides my mom's house to get something to eat. So I think being around the dinner table, I think, is where we spent most of our time, just kind of breaking bread and enjoying space with others with some food.
Food is the place to gather around, isn't it?
It is.
So is there a favorite place in Central Florida besides your mom's house to go for food, like a restaurant?
Ooh, Melaus. So they do have one here in Orlando, but I definitely prefer the one in Kissimmee. And it's a bakery, it's a lechonera, and they do catering. I've ordered a couple cakes from there. So that's definitely a place to check out.
All right. And what other cultural heritages have you been encountering and learning anything about since you've been in Central Florida here?
Yeah, so I would definitely say with the migration of our Puerto Rican community coming after Hurricane Maria, making sure we understood the needs of those that were migrating. Also understanding the needs of our undocumented community, which is diverse, right? I've just joined partnerships with an organization called Positive Assistance, which caters to our Haitian American community that are also sometimes undocumented as well and face challenges when it comes to being here in the States, other linguistically, just access, right? So just being able to unite with other organizations and understand that we don't necessarily have all the answers, right? Like we're not the only queer Latinx organizations. There's others that do amazing work. So just uplifting their work as well as them uplifting ours and just joining forces. I think having platforms like these where we're able to uplift in conversation what we do in community, I think is so powerful because you're knowledge sharing, right?
And what is your organization?
So my organization is QLatinx. We're a gender, social, racial grassroots organization here in the Central Florida area focused towards our Latinx queer community. We were started shortly after the Pulse tragedy because we realized there weren't many voices for or by our community. So we first gathered as a healing space, and almost 6 years later, we have 6 different departments that work on a variety of different issues from immigration to healing justice to gender justice, reproductive access, and now we just added a health equity position as well.
Well, when you look around Central Florida, from your perspective, what's one thing that we need?
More room and capacity for community leaders to come together in an authentic space. I think
Yes.
I think after, as sad as it was after the Pulse tragedy, I think we had a lot of that unity. And I think for a lot of Black and Brown organizations, there was voice given. But I also think after the lights and the cameras went away, that kind of dissipated and kind of everybody went back to their own silos. There are still several organizations that still do reach out and are very intentional. But I think just creating more spaces where we can be authentic and true to ourselves, I think is so needed.
Yeah, there's a lot of groups doing good for the community, and sometimes we just are focused on our little segment of it.
You're right.
Well, and that's Fusion Fest. The whole philosophy is bring us all together. Although there's although there's Puerto Rican Day festivities and there's Haitian Day and there's Arab Day and Japan Fest, etc. When we all come together, we are Central Floridians together. So thank you for coming on and talking with us today. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You bet. And thank you for watching this edition of Diverse Orange. I also on Thursdays do Playfully Orange, talking about arts and culture here in Central Florida. Thanks, everyone.